I want to talk, Brian. You're obviously coming off a loss to Nikita Mikhailov in your last time out in Russia. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that fight and, some of the posts you put out there around your mental health and things like that. But first, there was a photo, and I'll put it up on screen for anyone watching. It was, I think, Lee Hamilton Cooper took a couple of photos where, you just come backstage after the loss, and he kind of captured this moment of you on the phone calling home and calling your daughters. Like, I just found it was an incredible photo, and it kind of gave an insight into those moments that we don't often see after you leave the cage. What are the emotions like when you're phoning home after a loss like that?
It's kind of very hard to talk about my emotions then, because I feel so much different now than I did back then than I did for the lead up to that fight. I had some things that happened personally. I had two incidents. I brought up a lot of things from when I was a younger man, and I didn't really know how to deal with them, to be perfectly honest. I never spoke to a professional about it. I tried to tough my way out of it, and during that training camp, I distracted myself as best I could with training, but even at that, I couldn't focus on my training. I was consumed by these things that were going on in my life, and again, I couldn't separate them. I couldn't focus on the task at hand. But I kind of done enough to kind of tough through it. But then when I arrived in Russia, all of a sudden I was away from my family. I had no training, and I was in a hotel room, and there was no escaping it. There was no escaping these thoughts that were in my mind, and these things that I had buried for many years, and they just came to the surface. And when I was in Russia, it was a rough time for me. I went 50, it was 51 or 2 hours without sleep. I couldn't, I was having panic attacks. I just felt dreadful, and I never felt to that extreme before with these things. And, then you can see like my demeanor and the weigh-ins and interviews. I just was kind of blank. I didn't feel like myself, and I didn't really have like, I felt sad. I didn't feel like there was a fight coming. I was just trying to deal with all these things. And then all of a sudden the fight was there, and I felt numb. I didn't have any like killer instinct. I had no real emotions. I had no real desire to fight. I didn't want to fight. And then when I went backstage, I was still pretty numb during the fight. I was getting hit and all these kind of things. And, I had the armbar with it when they kind of run out with the clock, and that didn't even really disappoint me that much. But then when I got on the phone and I rang home, and my wife, she spoke to me, and then my daughter came on the phone, and then it all, hit home. It all kind of, then the emotions came back in. So it was like really emotional up to the point of the fight. Then the fight occurred, and it was just a difficult time then when I rang home. But like it was good in the sense that I knew that, okay, a fight is a fight, but I'm going home to like tremendous people. But to be honest, the way I felt in the lead up to the fight, and how I felt in Russia, I made my mind up that when I got home, I was going to see a therapist to talk these things, because like I said, I had no experience of trying to deal with these, and it was many years kind of manifesting, I suppose. And the work that I've done in since, I think I'm very proud of it. And I've been working with a therapist, I've been working with a sports psychologist, and like I feel like a much better developed person. You know what I mean? As a result, I feel much happier, much happier.
Well, firstly, I'm sorry to hear that you were feeling that way then, but I'm also very glad to hear that it sounds like you're in a much better spot now. And there's a lot to unpack kind of from what you just said there. So I guess, when you were in Russia, and how many hours did you say you weren't able to sleep for? Was it 53 hours, did you say?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because like I was like, I'm always very like in tune with my sleep and my headspace, my HRV, my heart rate, everything.
Yeah.
And like my heart rate was like always through the roof. I went 50 hours without sleep, 51 hours. I remember looking at my phone and trying to calm down, trying to get myself into a better state. And my Calm app, I had like 6 hours of meditating, and I still was like a coiled spring. There was no, usually if I do all these little interventions, or I have that help, but nothing was helping. It was just it was probably the worst period of my life, to be perfectly honest. And not that like bad things haven't happened to me before, but I just couldn't. I didn't have the tools to combat it, And I'm working with a phenomenal therapist. She's a fantastic woman. I'm working with a man that Kieran McGeeney from the sports psychology end of it, and between the two of them, I'm feeling fantastic. I feel amazing, and it's one of the reasons why I wanted a good opponent. I wanted a good opponent to show these improvements. But win, lose or draw, come February 25th, I feel like a better human anyway, like a better father, a better husband, a better everything. So I'm glad I made that step finally, and the only regret I have is not doing it sooner, but you can't turn the clock back, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you mentioned having panic attacks in the lead up on fight week, in the lead up to the fight. Like, is this something that you've dealt with for a while? And maybe firstly, what was it like when you were having those panic attacks? Is there any way you can describe kind of that fight week?
Yeah, so for instance, like I've struggled on and off with my mental health for 17 years, say 18 years. But it'd be periodic. It wouldn't be consistently, like most. I've been unofficially diagnosed as having OCD, and but panic attacks were pretty, like I think I've maybe had one or two. It's either one or two in my whole life, and then in Russia it was very common, like it was happening every day while I was there, and it was me panicking about not sleeping, and with me panicking about of a fight, because I was so consumed with other thoughts that all of a sudden, oh, I'm fighting, you know what I mean? And it was just a very strange time, you know what I mean? But yeah, look at it. I just remember that hotel room, and I was just doing everything I could to try to get some sort of a release. I was having like in the shower at 4 a.m. Just to try and calm down. You know what I mean? But look at it. I'm equipped with a much better outlook now. And again, talking to these people, and when I put up the post, I had people who reached out to me who'd been to people and spoke to professionals before, and how that impacted them, and that gave me, a kind of a boost to see that this is a good move. And then weeks later, then people messaged me saying that when I put that up, that they reached out to speak to a professional, and they're doing well. So I'm very happy that that people have done this. And one thing that people said after the fight is, oh, if you only had 10 more seconds, you would have finished him, perhaps. But I guarantee you, if I did, I more than likely wouldn't have went home and rang a therapist. I probably would have been on a high of winning a fight, let this pass, and then let it reoccur again. So these things, I suppose, happen for a reason. And here we are. I'm in a good place. I have a great fight ahead of me. I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited compared to the last time. I'm super excited to get back in there.
As weird as this is to ask, from the perspective of your mental health, are you glad that you lost?
It's weird. Yeah, look, it's a weird fight. I can't say that I'm glad that I lost, because nobody likes losing, especially someone who's super competitive like myself. However, like I really do not think I remember being in Russia and saying, right, when I get home, this is before the fight, when I get home, I'm making that call, I'm making that phone call. But I've said that plenty of times in the last decade or more, and something else would come in the way, or I wouldn't have time, or I would make or procrastinate, or I wouldn't commit to it. But this made me, and who knows, like, it's hard to explain to anyone who isn't a fighter, but when you win a fight, it's ecstasy, you know what I mean? And that can overshadow the days, the weeks that have just went. So perhaps, it probably was a good thing that I didn't get that armbar, I didn't get that triangle, or I didn't get that choke. Do you know what I mean? Because I'd probably be back to square one. All I do know is right now I'm in a better place than ever, and I'm so glad of that. I've always been a really good dad. I pride myself on being a really good, active, interested father, and how could you not be with the two girls that I have? But I feel like I'm much better now. Again, I feel like I'm a better husband, like I said, a better person, better friend. You know what I mean? So, I don't have regrets with what happened.
You mentioned that this is something that your mental health has been something you've been dealing with for decades now. But has it always kind of intertwined with fighting, or to what extent prior to the last camp has it had an impact on your fighting career, I guess?
Yeah, like I said, I would go through bouts of going through like being very anxious, you know, of more so anxious than depressed, to be honest. And you know, it would intertwine with fights, because when you are coming up to such a big contest, you know, you want everything right. And, you know, if things don't go right, you get more anxious. And of course, if you're going to fight a man, you know, in the most real sport, there's a lot of anxiety around that. And other times I would be able to handle it well. I would always be nervous before a fight. I think every fighter is, but, you know, I'd probably take it to the extreme. And often, you know, the more nervous I am, the better I perform. But, you know, it's the lead up to it. Like, you know, if I can stay, you know, if I can handle my anxiety during camp, I put in better camps. You know, I'm not so stifled. I'm not so, you know, on edge. And I feel like that's been that has, you know, stifled me before. However, look at it, you know, whether it's like my therapist said, whether it's OCD or whether it's OCD traits of being, you know, having a lot of anxiety. Either way, there's, you know, there's kind of there's good traits in that too. Like, I'm a very organized person. I can, you know, like I don't let things slip. I make sure everything gets done, in a sense, you know what I mean? So I've been able to use that in my fight game too, you know. And I've kind of looked at it in a positive way since, of implementing other things that I won't get into. But, you know, there obviously are downfalls, and I've been working on them flat out, really. And like I said, I'm in a really good spot.
That's great. And I guess kind of the recurring theme that I'm hearing is around control. And like it must have been very difficult, like prior to kind of putting this work in and getting to the place where you are now, to go into a fight. Or like there's only so much in a fight camp, say, that you can control, and there's only so much in a fight that you can control. It must be very difficult to go into those situations where it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, control was kind of something that was important to you, and then to not have that when you're going into a fight to an extent.
Yeah, so like for instance, one of the ways, one of just one example is like, if I walked into a room and it was like untidy, I can't concentrate, I feel itchy, I feel like this thing has to be sorted before I can do anything. You know, that was the way, you know, it was the, I don't consider it's the way I was. I'm not cured, you know what I mean, but I am a hell of a lot better. But that was the way I used to always think. That's just me, but it's not. It's me being anxious about something and not having control, but at least I can control this thing. Do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? But it's learning that you can't control these things, but but that's a trigger. If I'm feeling that I need to try and control this, I need to control this environment. Well, what is out of control? Why am I anxious? And I can bring it back to that. So that's a trigger. I can identify that, and then I can sort out what actually is really going on, and that's been a huge help. So when I feel that way, I can go, okay, what is actually going on? What do I need to focus on? What do I need to work on? You know, what's bothering me, and I can get to the root of it now, rather than, you know, going mental at the house or the car or
Hmm.
whatever it is. You know what I mean? And in a fight, it's trying to control that chaos, but there is no control. You really, anything can happen in a fight, and I'm aware of that. But the more I can, the more I try control of it, the less and the more stifled I was. You know what I mean? So, you know, it's been a learning curve. I've been doing a lot of work, and I feel fantastic for it. And like I said, I'm proud of myself for doing it, because it took me a long time to do it, but it's been a big learning curve, and I've embraced it, and I feel like I'm doing very well.
A smile kind of came on your face there when you were talking about, you know, you put up the post and people reached out and kind of could relate. And then when you put up the subsequent post about kind of the work you've been putting in, and more people could relate. When I picture, I guess, you know, you're talking about being up for so many hours and days really, over in Russia, it sounds very lonely. Like, was there a relief when people reached out to you to identify, to show that, look, you're not alone in these types of struggles?
Yes, but it kind of came after. Do you know what I mean? I needed, like, it wasn't immediate because I hadn't dealt with anything as of yet. You know what I mean? I was so confused. Like, I was so confused of why, you know, I felt like that. You know, and like I said, I have felt like that for a number of years in times, but it just hit a peak. It hit like a pinnacle in a negative sense. And that pinnacle sounds like a good thing, but and I was so confused, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. And, you know, I had my first you know, therapy session, which was heavy. It was fucking very heavy. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was one of the best things I've ever done, you know. And when I done that, and then people had messaged me, I went, oh yeah, now I know what they're talking about. Now I know. And like, nobody has reached out to me, or nobody in my years since I've been alive have said, yeah, I went to a therapist, it was shit. Yeah, I really regret it. No one has ever said that to me. And I don't think there's going to be too many people that would, you know. It's not easy. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of, but that was what the thing is. You're working through it. There was a lot of tears when I was in Russia and during that camp too. But I didn't know how to sort of let things out, how to feel good. But at least you're working through it with a professional, and I think it's a really good way. And you know, I'd recommend it to, don't let yourself get to a point where, you know, it's like, okay, now I need to do, you know, go back the way and you know, go quicker and don't regret it. You know what I mean? There's no harm in delving deep and seeing what's going on, you know, and kind of trying to prevent it rather than trying to cure it as such.
Brian, shifting to your next fight. So Jornal Lugo.
Thanks.
Coming in. We get off the heavy topics.
Yeah.
No, firstly, I really appreciate the honesty. I know it's not easy. And fair play to you for reaching out and getting help, and you know, really genuinely fair play to you. So moving on to the camp.